Nostalgia is one heck of a drug, and I know I find myself abusing it way more often than not. Excuse me for just one moment. Here we go. Oh, yeah, that's gonna last me until the Knights of the Old Republic remake. We long for those blissful days when we didn't have a care in the world, and that's why remakes and remasters are just so popular. They give us that little bit of nostalgia that reminds us of a time so long forgotten. Whether you were fighting battle droids in LEGO Star Wars, caring for your virtual pet on Webkins, or chilling with your homies in Castle Wars, we all long to go back to those blissful days. But far too often a piece of media will lean just too much into whatever nostalgia it may have to offer, instead of standing up on its own legs and making itself great just on its own merit. If nostalgia is a drug, then SpongeBob SquarePants The Cosmic Shake is the biggest dealer on the streets right now. Riding heavily on the coattails of Battle for Bikini Bottom, The Cosmic Shake was developed with the intention to be a spiritual sequel to that game, and it leans into that distinction big time. From style to substance, The Cosmic Shake is built off of everything that made Battle for Bikini Bottom so great in the first place, but what makes a game great 20 years ago isn't necessarily what makes a game good now. All forms of media, video games included, need to evolve to stay relevant over time. We aren't watching movies in black and white or listening to music on cassettes anymore unless there's an artistic reason for it. Obviously, games and other pieces of media will blast the past now and then, but like I said, it's often an intentional facet of its purpose as art. Thank God we don't have to play horror games with tank controls anymore, though a developer may decide to implement them to give that vibe of a time long past. And usually they'll throw on some heavy PS1 style texture warping and a VHS filter to make it really feel like you're in 1994. A great example of something nostalgic that's kept up with the times is a game I mentioned earlier, LEGO Star Wars. I've grown up with Star Wars my entire life, and the original LEGO games mean a lot to me, but these two games are almost 2 decades old. They will be in just a few years. While they've aged pretty well, you can still see and feel the antiquity in both titles, graphics being the biggest detractor, but even the gameplay is very simplistic. Not to mention the mumbling LEGO characters pantomiming the story of the original movies. The recently released Skywalker Saga definitely piggybacked off of people's nostalgic feelings toward these games, but it was able to innovate and revolutionize on a lot of these classic gameplay elements to help modernize the entire franchise. The game looks utterly breathtaking, and the gameplay is exceptionally fresh and varied, offering a good amount of depth while still being approachable to players of all ages. Something I've witnessed firsthand because I watched my youngest cousin play this game and he barely had a problem making his way through it. Plus, you can even change out the actual voice acting in the game for the classic mumbling because it's just something nostalgic that people enjoy. Back to the Cosmic Shake, gameplay-wise, it's just painfully average. When I said it takes a lot from Battle for Bikini Bottom, I meant it in more ways than just nostalgia. Controls feel copy-pasted straight from Battle for Bikini Bottom. That's not a bad thing per se. Battle for Bikini Bottom controls just fine, again, for a 20-year-old game. This was a big critique with the rehydrated remaster, but in that sense, I think it was okay to keep the more generic gameplay style because it helped keep the feel of that original title, which is what it was going for because it was a remaster and not necessarily a remake. It's the same principle with the original Resident Evil remasters. By far, I prefer the modern remakes of RE2 and 3, but these classic isometric tank controlling games capture that feeling of the originals. It's different when you're making a game that's supposed to be a follow-up or sequel of sorts to the original. Let's take a look at another widely popular platforming franchise, Mario. Now, see, Mario 64 is a great game. It still plays really well, but obviously it has aged, and it does not play as good as, say, something like Odyssey, which is probably one of the best playing platformers ever. Now, say Odyssey came out, and it played exactly like Mario 64, down to a T. That would be kind of frustrating, wouldn't it? We would be complaining about that. It's the same principle, really. You need to innovate and update what older games didn't do too well and reiterate on that and just make it better with each subsequent release. Cosmic Shake does this to a degree, but their attempts at innovation just kind of fall short. SpongeBob feels a bit too slow and heavy for a game of this style. It's pretty ironic seeing, how he's like a sponge. But he's supplemented with a handful of new moves to make up for the loss of 2 playable characters from Battle for Bikini Bottom. These include a bubble projectile, a flying karate kick, and a glider made from a Krusty Krab pizza. The glider is honestly just kinda lame. It doesn't provide a lot of distance, and activating it is pretty clunky, resulting in a lot of misinputs that lead to a swift death. The karate kick is flashy, and it's pretty cool to go flying through the air, but it dumbs down a lot of the platforming segments where it's used. SpongeBob just locks onto whatever he's attempting to kick. While in combat this is actually pretty helpful, it makes the platforming segments where the kick is used just kinda brain dead easy. That is when the kick's lock-on actually works. SpongeBob isn't going to kick unless he actually locks onto whatever it is he's trying to kick, and when it doesn't lock on, he doesn't kick, and that means you're dying. As with the kick, the bubble projectile has much more utility in combat than it does in platforming. It's only used to activate switches in some inflatable platforms, while against enemies it temporarily stuns them. Really the greatest improvement to SpongeBob's moveset is the grapple ability, as it opens up a lot more platforming flexibility, and it really makes you feel like SpongeBob. There are a couple other abilities SpongeBob unlocks as well, like a bubble surfboard and a reef blower, but these are locked to specific areas and are either timed or limit SpongeBob's wider platforming capabilities, meaning they have extremely limited use and feel more like gimmicks rather than gameplay features. Rudimentary platforming like this might sound good in a game geared towards children, and while it does make the game more approachable to a degree, it just hurts the overall experience. Another game franchise that I just mentioned earlier that does this really well is Mario. Each of the Mario games are super approachable to children. I should know, I grew up playing all of the Mario games my entire life. Of course, each game does have its challenges that are geared towards older or more experienced players, but every Mario game can be picked up and beaten by a child. Honestly, most 3D platformers present themselves really well for kids. They have bright, colorful, cheery appearances and pretty straightforward objectives, unless there's something more geared towards adults like Conker's Bad Fur Day. Truthfully, most of the new abilities work better for combat than for platforming. They flow together nicely and make the combat very fluid and satisfying. Chaining karate kicks, bubbles, and dodge rolls while taking down a ton of jelly monsters is one of the most fun parts of the game. Compared to Battle for Bikini Bottom's combat, it's way more advanced than just running into enemies and attacking to defeat them, and it kind of proves my point that you can still have a game geared towards kids that has a lot of depth and variety to its gameplay. Like I said, the platforming is basic, it doesn't revolutionize anything at all, but it isn't horrible to the point where the game is unplayable. It really only becomes challenging or frustrating when you need to make precise jumps. Landing on small platforms can be a bit of a pain, but you'll usually only encounter these when hunting for collectibles. It's no surprise that the Cosmic Shake is a collectathon, seeing as it's pulling every aspect it can from Battle for Bikini Bottom. It's just rather unfortunate that most of the collectibles you can get in the game are rather worthless in the grand scheme. The absolute worst are the golden spatulas, an obvious reference to Battle for Bikini Bottom. These offer absolutely no reward when collected. The game really doesn't even tell you that they are there to collect. It's obvious they were only implemented to activate the neurons of Battle for Bikini Bottom nut jobs like myself. They're really the perfect metaphor for the game as the whole. Shiny little golden relics of nostalgia that offer absolutely no substance. In my personal opinion, I really like it when collectibles offer a substantial reward when you collect them, and the Cosmic Shake really just doesn't do that. In Cosmic Shake, the main collectible is doubloons. These aren't needed for gameplay progression, but rather unlock bonus costumes you can use to change SpongeBob's appearance. The costumes you can unlock were a major selling point in the game's marketing. For some reason, like a listed on the back of the box level gameplay feature. As you progress through the game, you'll unlock new costumes that are often a reference to the TV show in some way. Many of the extra costumes you get from doubloons are also more references to the show or other SpongeBob projects. They're a cool bit of fan service, don't get me wrong, but it's weird these costumes were such a focal point of the game, especially seeing as they don't offer any extra abilities. Even if the collectibles were worth collecting, they really just aren't that fun to find. The game tries to do a mix of Battle for Bikini Bottom's open-ended exploration and more linear levels and progression that just results in a poor mix of both. Levels are mostly straightforward, but have a couple hidden areas or platforming challenges where these collectibles are stowed away. None of the levels have bad designs, and they all offer significant but appropriate challenges for the type of game this is. It's kinda similar to Battle for Bikini Bottom, but it doesn't have nearly as good of an execution. In that game, the levels were exceptional playgrounds of exploration. Each one had 1 or 2 primary spatulas that were locked behind completing a specific objective, but there were so many others you could unlock at your own pace. They did an exceptional job of promoting exploration and presented you with actual unique challenges instead of just hiding the collectible off in some little corner. The combination of lackluster rewards and kind of mediocre challenges to find them makes me not want to collect the bonuses in the Cosmic Shake. Gameplay takes place across 7 areas called Wish Worlds, each of them having their own unique theme, with a ruined Bikini Bottom taking the role of the hub world. It's obvious this takes cues from Battle for Bikini Bottom. As you progress through the town, you unlock more and more Wish Worlds, the objective of each of them being to rescue whoever is lost inside of the current Wish World. This can be done pretty quickly, and the main appeal of these levels is to go back and explore to find all of the hidden collectibles. Each of the Wish Worlds do a great job at feeling fresh. The visual flair unique to each level does most of the work in helping them stand apart, and each Wish World offers their own platforming challenges, puzzles, and other obstacles. Since it's SpongeBob, the game is obviously geared towards children, but it appeals primarily to classic SpongeBob fans like myself, a bunch of 20-somethings chasing the last time they felt happy. Now, don't expect any award-winning narratives. I mean, it is SpongeBob. And, honestly, I shouldn't really have to say anything like that. Like I said, it's SpongeBob. Straight from the get-go, the game feels like an episode ripped straight from the show. On a trip to Glove World, SpongeBob and Patrick encounter the mysterious Madame Cassandra, who gives them a bottle of magic bubble soap with the ability to grant wishes. It isn't long before, in true SpongeBob fashion, that things go haywire. SpongeBob's wishes collapse the fabric of reality and send Bikini Bottom into cosmic chaos, trapping all of his friends in alternate universes called Wish Worlds. The game's dialogue does a passable job, but it misses a lot of what made classic SpongeBob so great in the first place. Much of the humor consists of the overuse of classic SpongeBob jokes and memes. Around every corner is a reference to an iconic SpongeBob scene. From the guy who screams chocolate to Patrick saying he wants to go to Finland, it feels like they didn't even try to come up with their own jokes and just relied on classic gags they knew fans of the show would enjoy. And even though it's very obvious and gets kind of old, I still found myself getting super excited when one of these lines or references showed up in the game. Is this guy gonna say meep? Yes! Good. Also, if you'd like to see me stream games like this live, come stop by my Twitch, where I stream every Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday starting at 7 p.m. Eastern.
Shameless plug over.
The Cosmic Shake sets up a lot more of a plot, but it does very little with it. The characters you rescue from each of the Wish Worlds have their own self-contained stories, and it makes the game itself feel similar to the episodic format of the show. Madame Cassandra, the game's antagonist, cartoonishly reveals herself to be the villain early on, though she never does anything to show her darker side until the very end of the game. I guess you could make the argument that she's working in the shadows, biding her time until the perfect time to strike, but she makes a lot of jokes, and they're really obvious ones that she has some bad intentions, and SpongeBob just sits there blissfully unaware. It really makes me mad, because Purple Lamp said they worked with the writers of the show, but that's where the crux of the problem is. Modern SpongeBob depicts the character as a mindless buffoon, an idiot like Patrick, when in reality he's just kind of naive and a whole lot childish. With the Cosmic Shake, I was hoping for something a little more substantial than what we ended up getting. Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated showed Purple Lamp had the chops to make a good SpongeBob game, but not what was needed to effectively bring the character into the modern day. If you took this game and stripped away all references to SpongeBob, this game would not be receiving the attention it's getting. But to be honest, it isn't a bad game. It's a solid enough platformer with a lot of content there for those willing to explore. It just doesn't live up to modern standards. Its reliance on references and the legacy of its predecessor make it feel a lot more like the ukulele of the SpongeBob franchise. If you're a fan of the show, I still definitely recommend checking the game out at least. You'll get a lot of fun out of it. Fan service is still fan service, but if you're a fan of 3D platformers in general, I'd pass, or at the very least, wait for a sale. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. I know I enjoyed making it very much. If you would like to see more, please do be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss another video. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.